There are 196 tribes alive today that will kill you for getting too close. But within a decade, most of them will be gone forever. I spent weeks researching why, and what I found is insane. Governments are hiding their existence, corporations are stealing their land, and someone ate Michael Rockefeller. Today, we're traveling to 3 different regions to uncover the truth. Of course, we have to start our exploration at North Sentinel Island. Here lives a tribe that has been isolated since the Ice Age, and has killed anyone who dare to step foot on their home. North Sentinel Island is located in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and it is part of the nearby Andaman Islands. While the Andaman Islands were brutally colonized by the British and turned into a prison colony, North Sentinel Island was left alone. But this peace would not last. Near the end of the 1800s, 3 Indian convicts escaped the prison colony in nearby Port Blair, and made their way in a makeshift raft to North Sentinel Island. Bad choice. A search party later found that 2 drowned in the reef while 1 made it to the beach. He was filled with dozens of arrows. This was the last time they were bothered for 4 decades. After Indian independence, the new government officially declared North Sentinel Island as a tribal reserve and prevented anyone from visiting it. A 1974 expedition by filmmakers and anthropologists attempted to befriend the tribe. The islanders eventually appeared hours later brandishing their weapons and making threatening gestures towards the outsiders.
A member of our film unit was wounded by one of the many arrows, each 2.5 meters long.
The tribesmen continued to taunt and laugh at his unfortunate victim. It was decided to leave the island alone. That was until something miraculous happened. On a stormy night in 1981, an entire cargo ship named the Primrose crashed ashore. Soon after, the crew noticed small naked men peering at the vessel from the beach. More and more appeared until there were over 50 men with bows in hand taunting the crew. The true terror began when the islanders started preparing makeshift boats to come to the vessel. All they had for weapons was a few axes and pipes, so they urgently radioed for a drop of firearms. Luckily, a rescue helicopter was able to make it to the island and rescue the crew right before violence could erupt. The ship was abandoned and the Sentinelese presumably went aboard. It must have been like entering an alien spaceship. Neolithic eyes seeing incomprehensible technology. The ship was eventually salvaged by the Indian government under the watchful eyes of the Sentinelese, and it can still be seen today on Google Maps. After this period, the island was left alone for quite some time. Many officials were beginning to question the wisdom of attempting to contact a people who were healthy and content. But their peace was interrupted in 2006 by the drunk fisherman incident. 2 men were illegally fishing off the shore of the island. After a day of fishing, they tossed in an anchor consisting of a rope tied to a rock, and drank themselves to sleep. The boat drifted into the shallows when the Sentinelese attacked and killed the 2 men. This event marked the first known casualties in 110 years on the island, but fascinating photos were taken of the islanders hanging out on the recently captured boat. The island remained uncontacted until 2018, when the most famous event in the island's history unfolded. John Allen Chau grew up in a very religious environment. He devoted his life to missionary work, and traveled to remote regions in Iraq and Mexico to spread the word. He had an obsession with finding the most isolated people to preach to. In October 2018, John traveled to the Andaman Islands. He wrote in his journal that he was planning to go to North Sentinel Island, which he called Satan's last stronghold. Eventually, he found some fishermen that were willing to take him to the island. He kayaked up to the shore where he encountered 2 Sentinelese. They came out shouting and making gestures with their bows and arrows. John yelled at them that Jesus loved them and then brought them a large fish as a gift. The 2 islanders did not fire any arrows before John quickly paddled away. Later, John returned to where he last saw the 2 men on his kayak. This time, 6 Sentinelese came out taunting him. John wrote in his journal that, "I tried to parrot their words back at them. They burst out laughing most of the time, so they probably were saying bad words or insulting me. I yelled some phrases and sang them some worship songs and hymns, and they would often fall silent after this." But here's when this nice little meet and greet went south. A child and a young woman, both with bows, came behind and I kept waving my hand saying no bows, but they didn't get the memo, I guess. Then a little kid with a bow and arrow came down the middle and I figured this was it. So I preached a bit to them starting in Genesis and disembarked my kayak to show them that I too have legs. But the little kid shot me with an arrow, directly into my Bible which I was holding in front of my chest. I stumbled back and I recall yelling at the kid for shooting me. I had to swim almost a mile back to the boat at the mouth of the cove. The plan now is to rest and sleep on the boat. But John just couldn't get enough. The following day, he wrote his final entry. Woke up after a fairly restful sleep, heading to the island now. I hope this isn't my last note, but if it is, to God be the glory. The events of his third visit are not known, but it ended with John being killed by the merciless iron tips of Sentinelese arrows. Clearly, John was misled and delusional. The Sentinelese are extremely vulnerable to disease. A single handshake could have killed their entire population. The story is unfortunate for all involved, but I still can't help but see the Sentinelese as the true victims. And sadly, the existence of the Sentinelese would once again be violated just last year. An absolute loser American YouTuber visited the island and left a Diet Coke and a coconut in hopes of establishing contact. Unfortunately for the collective gene pool, an arrow did not find his flesh before he was able to leave. He made it back to Port Blair where he was arrested and will soon face prison time. North Sentinel Island is only one of 196 uncontacted tribes. Yet they can teach us so much about the benefits of leaving tribal groups to live by themselves. I mean, just look at them. They look unbelievably healthy. They are well nourished with perfect teeth, and they're constantly laughing with their children. Now let's compare them to their brethren living in the Andaman Islands. 50% of them died in the first decades of colonization. They were put on diets of grain, oil, and alcohol that destroyed their health. Their island was turned into a prison colony, and more recently, a road was put through tribal lands for tourists to view them in so-called human safaris. The Sentinelese are not oblivious. They have agency and have actively chosen isolation. While they have luckily been able to survive, there are 195 other groups who are in imminent danger of extinction within the next decade. And nowhere is that danger more insane than in the Amazon, where tribal warriors are fighting gold miners with machine guns. We'll get to that, but first, we have to talk about the Shompen people who live in the same region as the Sentinelese, but face certain extinction. They live on Great Nicobar Island, a lush jungle teeming with life. Their island is small but extremely biodiverse, with at least 50 species that are only found there. The Shompen have remained remarkably isolated. Contact was made in the 1980s, but an epidemic caused up to 100 of them to die. As of 2001, it is estimated that there are only around 300 of them left. And guys, these people are almost certainly going extinct in the next decade. The Indian government is trying to turn their small Eden into the Hong Kong of India. It will be a megaport featuring an international airport, a power station, defense base, and tourism zone. This will take up over a third of the island, directly infringing on Shompen land. This is a death sentence to the Shompen people. Their main food source of pondenu tree fruit will be cut down, and they will be exposed to modern disease which already took out a third of their population. The Shompen are an animistic people. Every tree, plant, leaf, and flower is sacred and has a spirit of their own. They do not let people even cut leaves in their territory, and the Indian government is going to cut down millions of trees. The government claims that it will offset the loss of rainforest through planting new trees in the scrublands of northern India. This means absolutely nothing to the culture they are sentencing to death. To add insult to injury, the Indian government wants to encourage around 1 million tourists to visit the island every year. 39 international genocide experts wrote to the Indian president. They described the project as a death sentence for the Shompen, tantamount to the international crime of genocide. The Shompen are estimated to have lived on Great Nicobar Island for up to 10,000 years, and have every right to continue doing so. But their very existence is being traded for profit. They urgently need as many people as possible around the world to be their voice.
Guys, this is a lot bigger than a YouTube video. The organization Survival International is fighting for their existence.
The least we can do is to fill out this petition to send to the Indian government. Even sadder, the same story of erasure is playing out all over the world. Another such story comes from the Togatul people of North Maluku. They inhabit the interior of the island, remaining fiercely independent. According to local legend, they descend from coastal dwellers who moved into the jungle to avoid paying taxes. In the modern day, they number a few thousand, living in huts and hunting boar. Just like the Shompen, they are under threat. In 2023, footage of Togatul people warning logging companies to stay away was released. It is truly heartbreaking to see these people helplessly try to preserve their very existence. Absolutely no tribal people are safe when there is gain in exploiting them. But now it is time to move to the undeniably coolest place on Earth, Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea is the second largest island on Earth, and prior to the 1930s, it was completely uncharted. This is because the island's interior is nearly impenetrable. Dense forests made the voyage inland difficult, and hostile tribes often made it deadly. Eventually, some insane Aussies voyage inland looking for gold, but what they discovered would change the world. There were over 1 million uncontacted people living in complete isolation, but they were far from primitive. Many of them lived in massive agricultural villages, and archaeology would prove that they had been farming for over 10,000 years. And when filmmakers finally documented their world, they captured breathtaking battles with thousands of warriors. This was truly a world of its own, an entirely unique expression of humanity. The great-grandson of John D. Rockefeller actually got to document one of these battles. His photographs brilliantly show the reality of warfare, anticipation, battle, grief. Michael Rockefeller is famous for these photographs, but also for his tragic end. In 1961, Michael and an anthropologist and 2 local guides were in a dugout canoe about 3 miles from the shore. A wave overturned their vessel, and the 4 were stranded in the water. The guide swam for help, and later, Michael took his own chances and swam to shore with a jerry can float. The anthropologist stayed with the boat and saw Michael slowly disappearing in the distance. This was the last time he was ever seen. It was originally assumed that Michael drowned or was attacked by a shark or crocodile, but the story took a shocking turn. Following his disappearance, his ultra-wealthy family started an investigation. They found that the local Osmat tribe were headhunters. Headhunting is the killing of enemies and taking their heads as trophies, and cannibalism was also common here. 2 Dutch missionaries who were fluent in the Asmat language heard about Michael's disappearance and started asking around. They found a number of people who claimed to have answers. Apparently, Michael was discovered while swimming to shore. Exhausted, clad only in his underwear, he was pulled out of the water while the tribesmen argued about what to do with him. At some point, a warrior stabbed him in the gut, and then he was carried off into the jungle. His fate from there on is less agreed upon, but even more disturbing. Some locals claim that he was butchered and eaten. Others claim that his head and bones were cleaned and divided among the warriors, some ending up as fishing equipment and drinking vessels. Though his fate was likely gruesome, what could compel these people to commit such acts? According to villagers, it was a revenge killing from when Dutch soldiers opened fire on a village a decade earlier. In the Asmat culture, they had an eye for an eye revenge cycle. If an enemy killed one of your tribesmen, you had a sacred obligation to avenge their death. And thus, Michael Rockefeller seems to have been a victim of larger events he could not have possibly foreseen. And this is the case for most of the violent encounters with tribal people. They aren't senseless barbarians. Their violence is calculated and cultural. Papua New Guinea would eventually open up to the outside world during the 20th century. Villages turned to cities, but ancient tribal tensions remained. And the spread of firearms became absolutely devastating. These people jumped from the bow and arrow to fully automatic assault rifles literally in 1 generation. This has caused tribal conflicts to become far deadlier in the past decades. Where in the past a few men might get non-fatal arrow wounds, now battles would end in dozens of lifeless bodies. And even when firearms aren't available, skirmishes using traditional weapons break out. The footage that has come out of some of these fights is unbelievable. And you are damn right that the next video will explore the Fallout-esque world of modern tribal violence in Papua New Guinea. It's gonna be insane, so subscribe right now. But while most of the land is now effectively the modern world, there are still a handful of completely uncontacted tribes. As mentioned earlier, the island is huge, with very distinct regions from swampy lowlands and even mountains taller than any in the lower 48. The uncontacted tribes mainly live in the remote jungles of West Papua. There are a couple dozen groups still living as traditional hunter-gatherers here, some that have never even been documented. Of course, illegal logging and mining threatens them, and they may face challenges in coming decades. But now it's time to move on to the region with 95% of the world's remaining uncontacted tribes. The Amazon is the largest rainforest in the world, and while much of the Amazon still remains untouched, the region has a long history of exploitation. The most devastating was the rubber boom of the late 1800s. Harvesting rubber was hard, meticulous work that required a high volume of workers. In order to meet demands, rubber merchants enslaved thousands of indigenous people. Villages were raided in order to capture slaves, and women in particular became subject to trafficking. During only a few decades, 95% of the indigenous population was wiped out. The survivors were pushed away from the main rivers deeper and deeper into the Amazon. Most of the uncontacted tribes from this region are descendants of unimaginable trauma, but the nightmare just never ends for these people. Illegal logging and mining is pushing deeper and deeper. These criminals carry AK-47s and spray at any sign of life. They may have advanced firearms, but in reality, they are terrified of the shadows. Like Vietnam, the trees are talking. Hardened tribal warriors are known to silently attack with their massive 7-foot-long spear-like arrows.
That's easily a 7-foot arrow.
This is Paul Rosalie, a conservationist who has interacted with these tribes in person. And this story will chill you to your core.
They ambushed some of his people, and by the time he got there, I think it was his brother-in-law, was on the beach, flayed open at the stomach. They'd removed his testicles, they'd cut off his arms, and they'd opened his stomach to see what he was eating. And his wife had been with him when this happened.
To see what he was eating.
To see what he was eating, because we're that foreign to them. They don't understand. And just like a fish, they're like, let's see what it was eating. And so they just had to pick up the pieces of him and go. And there was arrows all over the beach.
The Mashkapiro are one of these groups still thriving deep in the Amazon. And recently, Paul encountered them in the wild. He even floated a boat filled with bananas over to them. But these people are unpredictable, and later, one of his friends nearly died.
George was driving a boat, and there was people on the boat, and as they were going upriver, the tribe, 200 of the tribe ran out, surrounded the boat, and they started firing arrows, and everybody else could hit the deck and get under the benches and hide behind bags of rice. George was driving, and he was leaning back as he's driving, and he's driving as fast as he can, and one arrow came in just above his scapula and came out by his belly button. And so he had that 7-foot arrow tip through him, and he had to be medevaced out, and somehow he lived.
What most people don't realize is that the Amazon is not some peaceful, untouched paradise. It's a violent frontier. Just like the North American plains of the 1800s, there is an active, ongoing conflict between settlers and the people who were there first. Loggers and ranchers burn their crops, poison their rivers, and push further in every single year. Brazilian authorities are routinely bribed and threatened into looking the other way. This has forced hundreds of tribes deeper and deeper into the jungle. These places are so remote that low-flying aircraft are the only way we can get a glimpse, and what they've captured is extraordinary. Massive circular shelters hundreds of feet across. Just imagine how long it would take to make such a structure, and frankly, it looks like a wonderful place to call home. These people belong to the Yanomami tribe, the largest isolated tribe in South America. While most Yanomami have had some contact with the modern world, these photographs document their most secluded band, one so wary of outsiders that they refuse all contact, even with their own people. There only seems to be about 100 living in this structure, and there are no communities within hundreds of miles. On the other side of the Amazon, the same aircraft took these photos. They are remarkably intimate. Seeing these people so clearly is almost unbelievable. You can see the awe on their faces when they see a plane. In all likelihood, they have no idea what they're looking at. A huge bird, a spirit, who knows? They are clearly mystified. Other photos show men aiming their bows at the aircraft. The body paint on these people is honestly terrifying. You have to wonder what the significance of it is. Some close-up photos have revealed enormous bows, some over 10 feet in length. They are similar to the design of Siriono bows, which can be 200 pounds in draw weight. This group of people numbers between 500 to 1,000 people, and this kind of documentation has allowed researchers to identify that their gardens are growing and more houses have been popping up over the past 2 decades. But not all communities have been so lucky. Dozens have simply faded into extinction. And that brings us to the tragic story of the Man of the Hole. Throughout the 70s and into the 2000s, armed settlers massacred indigenous communities across the region. One tribe was wiped out entirely, except for a single man discovered in 1996. Researchers found that he would move his home often, leaving behind the structure as well as a deep hole found at each home. They were deeper than the height of a man, and their purpose was unknown. In 2007, the Brazilian government officially protected his territory for him to live out his life in peace. Despite this, an armed gunman attacked him in 2009, but he survived. Researchers occasionally left him gifts of food and tools, but he refused. A video was even taken of him chopping down a tree in 2018, and despite being in his 50s, he seemed to be in good health. In August of 2022, the Man of the Hole was found dead in his hammock, surrounded by macaw feathers. He had clearly decorated his own deathbed and seemingly went out peacefully. With him died an entire language, an entire culture, an entire people, and sadly, he won't be the last. Dozens of communities around the world will face the same fate within 10 years if they are not protected. The real plot of Avatar is playing out all over the world right now, and you should be furious.
I find it incredible that some people are still living completely untouched by the modern world, and I hope they continue to thrive. But have you heard? Chimpanzees have entered the Stone Age. Click here to learn more, and also subscribe.